I don't think they.
Their trade's good.
What do they do?
I like her on straight. I like her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So she rushed me a dress like.
Yeah, well, it's in my jacket.
Yeah.
Just like.
There's also
I've
I feel like she shoot down. I like all in this corner.
Yeah. This hits. Oh.
What is it? Social media.
He should write himself so damn many kids.
Who?
Not you. I got a damn thing. Started out stupid. I didn't even Seems like something really entire school. But it does.
Yeah, what's up?
Ethan, what you do?
All right, everybody, welcome. All right, so after this week, I'm proud that we have completed our spring 2025 membership competition for the Trial Advocacy Board. My name is Jack Furla. I'm a 3L here at the law school, and I serve as the board's chair for this school year. I'm very proud to have our brand new members, 15 new members to our board. Let's give them a quick round of applause. And all of our current members who are here to help judge for today. This is a tradition that we've done for quite a few years now, where in the final round, the top 6 competitors from the membership competition will come in and present their closing argument again for the opportunity to win the award of Best Advocate. So we will hear from them in just a few minutes, but I just want to give a quick thank you to my excellent team for this week for all of their help judging, being here late nights, tallying scores, and being here for the team. So thank you guys for doing that. I really appreciate it. And without further ado, thank you for being here. We will get started.
All rise. The Honorable Judge Bryson Reeves presiding.
Thank you. You may be seated.
And say hello and thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Bryson Reeves. I'm the social media chair for the Advocacy. Yeah. Well, good afternoon, Counselor. Could you please state your name for everyone?
AK Green.
All right, Counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin with your closing argument.
Permission to enter and move freely about the law.
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. Revenge enacted is not justice served. In the realm of love and trust, we witness today a duality that can lead a person down a path of darkness and despair. Jolene and Jacob's relationship was one that was once filled with love, but it spiraled down a path of betrayal, rage, revenge, and murder. The evidence laid bare before you proves abundantly that the defendant was a woman driven by her anger, driven by vengeance, driven by rage, driven to murder her husband. Defendant's actions upon discovering the text messages that you've seen in today's trial show that she was a woman scorned, yes, but more than that, she was a woman with a vendetta. She went to the bar that night to confront him. She said, in her own words, if I can't have him, no one can. This, coupled with her intense anger and aggression directed at her husband and his lover as she confronted him in the bar, prove that this was a woman driven by rage, driven by anger, driven by her need and desperation for vengeance. This is a woman who was driven to murder her husband. The evidence is clear. The motive is undeniable. On the night of Jacob Tremont's tragic death, the defendant went to the bar to watch his betrayal with her own eyes. But in the end, she decided his fate with her own hands. Shortly after the defendant left the bar that night, the bartender, Harley Dennis, noticed a knife and a baseball bat missing from his bar. This same baseball bat has been forensically matched to the splinters in the headlights of the victim's truck, proving that this is the bat that caused this damage, that caused the crash that took the victim's life. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Today, we brought a second-degree murder charge against the defendant, Jolene Tremont, and we had to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that on the night of October 21st, 2021, the defendant committed second-degree murder. We had to prove to you that we had to prove to you that, yes, she intended to do this action. She may or may not have intended to kill him, but she intended to do this action, and that her action caused the harm. Now, as far as her intent to do so, you've witnessed today a woman filled with rage, a woman scorned, a woman betrayed, a woman whose husband has betrayed the life they built together, a woman who went to a bar, confronted her husband in a public place, filled with rage, a woman who uttered the words, "If I can't have him, no one can." The motive is undeniable. And as far as whether or not her actions actually caused a harm, I believe the thing speaks for itself. We stand here today because a man has been killed. And that man was flawed. That man was not perfect. Jacob Tremont was not without his faults, to be sure, and we acknowledge that. But the defendant is not the judge. The defendant is not the jury. The defendant is not the executioner. He had no right to decide his fate that night. However, today, the task of deciding hers falls to you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in a few minutes, you will receive what's called a verdict sheet. And when you receive it, you will be asked a very important question. Is the defendant guilty of this crime? And I would ask you to return the verdict that the evidence supports, the verdict that the justice demands, the verdict that the law requires. And I will ask you to hold the defendant guilty of murder of the second degree.
Thank you, counselor. If you'd like, you may sit behind the pews. We'll call our next.
You judge.
All right. Where is Josh? How are we?
He knows he's coming.
I just want to say it's been such a pleasure to watch everyone who tried out, watch everyone who made it. I want to give my own personal congratulations to everyone who made the team. It really is such a fun board, and we are so excited to be working with you all. Good afternoon, counselor. Will you please state your name for the court?
Tiffany Altenburn.
All right, counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin with your closing argument.
Your Honor, permission to conduct closing argument.
You may.
May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. This is a case that you have heard of a woman's rage and her revenge. Jolene Tremont believed her life to be perfect. She married her college sweetheart. She had 3 kids. That was until she discovered text from another woman on her husband's phone, arranging to meet at Funky's bar. The defendant decided to follow her husband to the bar, where she saw with her own eyes her husband cuddled up with this other woman. In her own words, the defendant said she saw red. She confronted the pair before storming out of the bar. She ordered an Uber to take her home, but before she got picked up, she saw her husband's truck parked outside of the bar. And that's when she decided she wanted revenge. She wanted revenge, and she wanted her husband to feel the pain she felt in that moment. So she took a knife she stole from Funky's bar, slashed the tires on his truck, and went home. Later that night, Jacob Tremont unknowingly entered what became his death trap, designed by his so-called loving wife. The truck was unsafe to drive, but Jacob didn't know that until it was too late. He ran off the road after he lost control, crashed into trees, which ultimately led to his death. The state has brought a charge of second-degree murder against the defendant. That is, we must prove that the death of Jacob occurred due to the defendant's reckless actions with a complete disregard to human life. Now, the law presumes everybody innocent until proven guilty, and the state has the burden to overcome that presumption. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime. Beyond reasonable doubt just means that no other explanation could result in Jacob Tremont's death. You have seen the evidence. You saw the text messages between Jacob and the other woman that the defendant discovered, which ultimately sent her into this fit of rage. You heard from Harley Dennis, who told you his eyewitness account to the defendant's rage before she stormed out of the bar, as well as testimony to a knife that went missing around this time. And you have also seen texts that Miss Drift received around this time that the defendant was in her state of rage and wanting to revenge. These texts were threatening, and who else would want to threaten Miss Drift? Members of the jury, you have seen the evidence of Jacob's truck with the slash marks in its tires. The slash marks that were from the defendant's act of revenge in her moment of rage when she stole a knife from Bunky's bar and slashed the tires to get her revenge. We ask that if you agree and find that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, that you will return a verdict of guilty on this sheet. Jacob Tremont was a loving husband, a father of 3 kids. He did not know that this night out having fun would be his last night alive. While stepping outside of one's marriage is not acceptable, the cost of this act should not have been the life of Jacob Tremont. So we ask, in this case of rage and revenge, you return a verdict that the evidence supports, that the law requires, and what justice demands, that Jolene Tremont is guilty of second-degree murder. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counselor. If you'd like, you can sit behind a bar. There are some people introduced. All right, counselor, will you please state your name for the court?
Only events.
Counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin with your closing argument.
May it please the court to move out the way.
Okay.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, jury. This case was simply about a woman scorn. Jacob Tremont was found dead in his vehicle. And it all started when Jolene Tremont found text messages, your phone, text messages that you saw and that we gave you. Those text messages enraged Jolene Tremont. Her sister told her, maybe you should confront Jacob about those text messages. So Jolene Tremont decided to go to Funky's bar incognito so no one could know who she was. But while she was there, Jacob Tremont passed by her on his way to the restroom. And she said he had his baby making cologne on. Well, that enraged her. So she did confront Jacob Tremont. And when she confronted him, there was a public confrontation that the witness, Henry Davis, would tell you that he heard her say, "If I cannot have him, no one can." After she left the bar, she went outside to wait for her Uber. That's a receipt from the Uber. And while she was outside waiting on her Uber, she noticed Jacob Tremont's truck. Members of the jury, we have charged Jolene Tremont with second-degree murder. Now, with second-degree murder, we have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt, and we have the burden of proof. It's a very high hurdle that we have to cross, but I believe we have proven that. Like, just imagine a dark theater, and the prosecution has to shine a light so bright that you can see every detail of the evidence. And we can't just shine a fake glow. We can't. Now, the defense can cast a shadow, but our light has to be so bright and the evidence so clear that you are not shaken or you don't have any doubt that the defendant is guilty. The evidence we have shown you of a depraved heart. Jacob Tremont's companion that was with him, Taylor Drift, would tell you. As she left the bar, she said, "If I cannot have him, no one can." Those are only words a scorned woman would say. The damage to Jacob Tremont's vehicle that wasn't from the collision, but was damage from the vehicle that suggests tampering, that creates a dangerous situation for someone. Anyone riding the vehicle that has been tampered with, that creates a dangerous situation. And then we know that there was no authority that bestowed upon Jolene Tremont to take a life. She was not a police officer. She's not in the military. She has no right to take a life. And we know that Jacob Tremont is a living human being, but he's not just that. He's a friend and a father. Jolene Tremont does not get the right to dictate the law. Jolene Tremont does not get the right to interpret the law. That's what we're here for. We're here for that. The law gave Jolene Tremont a remedy for a failed marriage. So what I beg for you, and what I urge you, is that you go, you all confer, take this verdict sheet as guidance. And I need you to check guilty. And I need it to be guilty because the evidence supports it, the law requires it, and justice demands it. Because this case was simply about a woman's scorn.
All right, thank you, Counselor. If you would, just take a seat outside of the bar and just the rest of it. Thanks for your time. All right, Counselor, you'll please state your name for the court.
Candy Salisbury.
Thank you, Counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin your closing argument.
Permission to move back along.
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, she made a grave miscalculation. It's 1:15 a.m., October 21st, 2021, and Officer Seymour has just received a call from dispatch telling him to go to County Road 31. When the officers arrived to the scene of the crime, they saw a horrible, tragic accident. There was glass everywhere, slashed tires, and Jacob Seymour's lifeless body was behind the wheel of the car. Next to him was his mistress, Taylor Drift. She was unconscious. She had barely escaped death. A few hours before that, the defendant angrily confronted her husband and the mistress. She was so angry because her husband was cheating on her. So she threatened them. She told them, if I can't have him, no one can. She wanted to put an end to the affair. So she decided she would steal a knife and a bat from Funky's bar. She would go outside and slash Jacob's tires and smash the front headlights of his vehicle. She knew that truck would get on the road and she wanted it to crash because she wanted to kill the mistress. She wanted Taylor to die. But she made a grave miscalculation. Members of the jury, as the judge will tell you in a few minutes, we are here today because we have charged the defendant with murder in the second degree. In this jurisdiction, second-degree murder essentially means that the defendant committed acts that were so dangerous, so indifferent of human life, that she killed someone. She put others' lives in danger. Today, we have proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that that's exactly what she did. I'd like to take a few moments to talk to you about what beyond a reasonable doubt means. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard in our legal system, and we take it very seriously. But it's not insurmountable. It's a burden that we can prove. It doesn't mean that the state has to present a perfect case. It just means that the state has to present a strong case. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what we've done here today. You've seen all the evidence. You heard the testimony of Detective Seymour. He told you about how he arrived to the scene of the crime and all 4 of Jacob's tires were slashed with 4-inch long puncture marks. He also told you about that front headlight that was destroyed by something other than the crash. He told you about pieces of wood that were inside that front left headlight. Wood that was directly linked to a bat from Funky's bar. Ladies and gentlemen, you also heard from the bar owner, Harley. He told you about witnessing the defendant leave out of the bar, storm out, angry. And he told you about that knife, didn't he? The knife that was there directly before she left. And you also saw the Uber transaction. You saw this. Didn't it show you that she left the bar and got an Uber home 3 hours later? Ladies and gentlemen, all the evidence here today
and the witness testimonies show you that the defendant committed very dangerous acts with extreme indifference for human life. She did not care. She didn't care. She didn't care that she was going to leave her children without their father. She didn't care that her sons would have to play baseball by themselves. She did not care that her daughter was going to have to walk down the aisle by herself because her dad is gone on her wedding day. She didn't care. All she cared about was getting rid of Taylor Jerry. She wanted to end the affair so badly, but she made a grave miscalculation. Members of the jury, the power is in your hands. You have the power to decide if Jacob's murderer is brought to justice. You have the power to decide. It doesn't matter what her intent was. She made a grave miscalculation. And members of the jury, today, when you fill out that verdict sheet, check the box that finds the defendant guilty.
Well, Councilman, thank you very much. You just stood out to the crowd. I know I spoke about the competitors, how much time they put into this, but I also want to thank all the friends that are here, everyone who just sat and listened. Competitors. I'd like to thank all the dogs out there who heard these repeated closing arguments. We really do appreciate just you being here in the courtroom right now. It shows a lot of support for us. And we can't thank you enough for your dedication to what we do here as an organization. Counselor, will you please state your name for the court?
Rachel Shoemaker Ritchie.
Counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin with your closing argument.
Your Honor, permission to set up a demonstrative and permission to move about the witness.
Okay.
Thank you. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, red hot anger should not be an excuse for murder. Let's talk about the story that you just heard. At today's trial, you saw that the defendant found out that her husband was talking to another woman and that they were meeting at Funky's in Oxford that weekend. Well, we know that the defendant decided to go to Funky's that weekend as well. After seeing Mr. Tremont and the woman he had been texting, the defendant became furious with red hot anger. She confronted them and stormed out, uttering the phrase, "If I can't have him, no one can." Well, members of the jury, this is where we know that the defendant allowed her red hot anger to get the best of her. She tampered with her husband's truck. She took a paring knife from the bar as she was leaving, punctured all 4 tires. She took a baseball bat that sat right outside the door and bashed in the driver's side. Because of this tampering, Mr. Tremont had a wreck shortly after leaving the bar
and was pronounced dead on the scene. Now we, as the state, have charged the defendant with second-degree murder. This means that we had to prove to you that the defendant tampered with her husband's truck, which showed a complete disregard for human life. And because of that act, Mr. Tremont was killed. Now, while the defendant lacked a pre-planned design to take her husband's life, she still allowed her red-hot anger to get the best of her. Now, let's break down each element, and then we'll talk about how we have clearly shown that each element has been met. First, the defendant intentionally committed an act that showed a complete disregard for human life. Second, because of that act, Mr. Tremont was killed. Now, it's also our responsibility to prove to you these elements beyond a reasonable doubt. And what does that mean? It means that we had to prove the defendant's guilt so strongly that you had no reasonable doubt about it. We aren't saying that you can't have doubt. You just cannot have reasonable doubt, meaning doubt based on logic or evidence. Now, let's break down each element and the evidence that supports it. First, the defendant committed an act that shows a complete disregard for human life. That act was tampering with her husband's truck. You heard Ms. Harley Dennis explain that it was the defendant that took the paring knife from the bar. You heard Detective Seymour testify that the forensic results showed that all 4 tires were punctured, with approximately 4-inch long punctures in them, which is conveniently about the size of a paring knife. You heard Detective Seymour testify that the wood found inside the bashed-in headlight matched the baseball bat that sits right outside of the door at Buc-ee's. Second, because of this act, Mr. Tremont was killed. You heard Detective Seymour testify that the cause of death of Mr. Tremont was blunt force trauma as a result of the crash. We showed you a picture of that crash, as seen here in Exhibit 3. Further, you heard her testify that the defective tires were more likely than not the reason Mr. Tremont ran off the road and crashed. Now, members of the jury, in just a few moments, you will receive a verdict sheet, as shown here. And on this verdict sheet, we ask that you complete one important task: to write whether you find the defendant guilty or not guilty. And members of the jury, we ask that you write guilty and find the defendant guilty for the murder of Mr. Jacob Tremont. We ask that you return this verdict because the evidence supports it, the law requires it, and justice demands it. Members of the jury, you have seen that the defendant allowed her red-hot anger to get the best of her that tragic night. But as you are deliberating, remember the evidence, remember Mr. Tremont's story, and remember red-hot anger should not be an excuse for murder. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Counselor. You will please assemble your demonstrative and join the rest of them on the ground. Just want to remind everyone as we come out on our last competitor, that we thank y'all for being here. We will ask the new members to come in. We'll take pictures and you may mingle amongst the crowd. Thanks so much for your support, and we hope to see you real soon. Great. Good. Good afternoon, Counselor. Could you please say your name for the court?
Ella Jordan.
All right, Counselor, whenever you are ready, you may begin your closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to move about the well.
You may.
May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, you have learned today that hurt people hurt people. On October 20th, 2021, Jolene Tremont was hurt. You see, Miss Tremont is someone who thought that she had the perfect marriage. She was married to her college sweetheart and was a stay-at-home mom to 3 children. But just a week before her husband's death, Miss Tremont learned that her husband had been having an affair with another woman for months. And this hurt Miss Tremont. So when she learned that her husband and this woman would be meeting at Funky's bar on October 20th, well, Miss Tremont made sure that she would be there too. As she sat at Funky's bar, she watched her husband act as if she didn't exist, as if their children didn't exist, as if their entire life together never happened. And this hurt Miss Tremont. So she walked right up to her husband and said, "How dare you do this to me?" It was at that moment that Miss Tremont decided to hurt her husband right back. So she stormed out of the bar, grabbed a knife, and walked into the parking lot and slashed all 4 of her husband's tires. And then she saw a bat by the employee door. She grabbed it and smashed her husband's headlights in. You see, Miss Tremont did this because she wanted her husband to hurt. And that's exactly what happened. Because when Jacob Tremont got in his truck just 1 hour later, it wasn't long before he crashed and died. Which is exactly why we have charged Jolene Tremont with 2nd-degree murder. In order to prove this to you today, we had to show you that through her actions, the defendant, without premeditation, intended to kill her husband and caused his death. Now, as a prosecution, we hold the burden of proof in today's case. This means that we had to show you that the defendant is guilty of the 2nd-degree murder of her husband beyond a reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, every piece of evidence you have heard today, every fact connects the defendant. And because of that, we have met our burden. The only reasonable explanation you have heard today is that the defendant was hurt, so she chose to hurt her husband in return. So let's talk about how we know the defendant was hurt. Well, because she told you so herself. Ms. Tremont took the stand today and told you how she found this series of messages between her husband and his lover. "I've made up my mind. I'll see you in a few days. Nothing can keep me from you." Now, for Ms. Tremont, who already had trust issues in her relationship, this was her worst nightmare come true. And when her husband responded, "Meet me at a bar named Funky's. I think you'll like it there. 9 p.m. Ms. Tremont made sure that she would be there too. And as she watched her husband jeopardize their entire life together, it was then that she decided, if she can't have him, no one can. So she confronted her husband and grabbed a knife. The same knife that Detective Seymour told you was the same knife that Detective Seymour told you was last seen just before she stormed out of the bar. And she used this knife to slash her husband's tires, which Detective Seymour confirmed. Because when he searched the crash scene, Detective Seymour found that all of the tires on Jacob Tremont's truck had a 4-inch gash in them. And not only that, Detective Seymour told you that he found evidence that Jolene Tremont used a bat to vandalize her husband's truck. In fact, wood fragments found in the left front headlight of Jacob Tremont's truck matched this bat found outside of Funky's. After reviewing all of the evidence he collected in today's case, Detective Seymour told you that Jolene Tremont is the person who killed Jacob Tremont. Ladies and gentlemen, we have proven that the defendant intended to kill her husband and cause his death. So when you go to deliberate today and agree that we have met our burden, you must check, we the jury, find the defendant guilty as charged on your verdict sheet, just like this one here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that on the night of her husband's death, the defendant was hurt. She was hurt by the discovery of her husband's infidelity, hurt by the betrayal of the man she loved and built a family with, hurt by the collapse of the life that she thought she had. But instead of seeking resolution, she let her pain consume her, and she chose to hurt her husband in return. And in doing so, she caused his death. Which is why we ask that you return from your deliberations today with the only verdict that the evidence supports, the law requires, and justice demands. Find Jolene Tremont guilty. Thank you. Your Honor, permission to publish the evidence and the jury demonstrative to the jury. Thank you.
All right, counselor, if you'll just sit with the rest of the crowd. Jury and I will deliberate. You will give us a couple minutes. We will have verdict out soon.
All rise. Okay, you all may be seated.
Yeah, round of applause.
We've been watching. It's just mistrust, right? That's all. Oh, God. I have class.
Glad to have you on here.
No. Let's go. Probably got it all. Yeah, I was like, I'm sure whiskey is an evil to say that. There's been free law. I'm so mad. I feel bad. I'm so mad. It's like, awesome.
I guess you like can't say it's like wrong. Indeed, Ross. Yeah. And I was laughing, I mean, oh my God, I was laughing because you messed up. I was probably. All rise. All rise. Mistrial. No respect, Ross.
Yeah, bro.
Thank you, you may be seated.
Gavel. Thank you.
Talking settled in.
Sorry, everybody. Let's go. Oh, isn't this?
Yeah, again, I want to thank everyone who tried out. I want to thank everyone who came. I want to thank all of our competitors. You all did so great. It was a really tough decision, but our jury has reached a verdict. So for our runner-up, we would like to announce that our runner-up is Miss Rachel Shoemaker-Risky. And for Best Advocate, we'd like to announce that our winner is Miss Ella, Gordon.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. That concludes our presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for being here. New members, please stick around. We've got some photos to take. And if you want to take photos of everybody too, you're welcome. Everyone's welcome to stay, but new members, come on up.
Fine, you know we got to look back. Very much. You know we got to look at. All right, bye. I'm gonna try.
I'm probably going out.